Reimagining Success, episode 249. You're listening to the Reimagining Success podcast, where we help you design a business and a life that allows you freedom from the 9 to 5. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, ex-corporate good girl, now a business mentor and coach, author, mum of 2, and I'm here to help you create more freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. Now let's get started with redefining success outside of the 9 to 5. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's interview. And I'm here with Damien Schreurs, who is known as, well, I don't know if you're known as, you tell me if you're known as the Macpreneur, if you work with Macpreneurs. We'll dive into that in a moment. But he's here to tell his story of escaping his Fortune 500 job in order to help people like you, I believe, people like me, certainly. And in the meantime, also regain control of his time, the time he spends both at work and with his family, which is a topic that's really close to my heart. And Damien and I met via the Entrepreneurship community, and I was just looking up, it's episode 192 if anyone wants to go back. Chris Ducker is the sort of head of the Entrepreneurship community. He coined that phrase, and that's how we were introduced. So if you are interested, he was on the podcast some time ago, and in fact I've had quite a few people from that community on here, so I'm really pleased to speak to you now, Damien. So first of all, welcome, and why don't you, in better terms than I do, introduce yourself and what you were doing before and what you're doing today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity for the interview. The way I see myself is I'm someone who help people from all ages be more comfortable with technology. And I would say that's at a very high level. And but with Macpreneur, I'm specifically trying to help solopreneurs who use Apple products and Macs in their business.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And I love how you position that. The value is clear, and I think people can very quickly identify with that. So walk us through your corporate career. You were an R&D engineer for 18 years, I think you said, and you started a business alongside that. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey in terms of deciding to set up a side hustle and how that went?
So starting the side hustle was actually linked to the birth of my daughter.
Okay.
So that's when I would say the idea of putting it in practice became a reality.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of having my own business started much earlier than that. It was in the last year at university. So I graduated as a physicist engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And in that last year, and I remember exactly where in the amphitheater, I had this idea of one day I will have my business. I will have my own business. And because I was already in like a fast moving train of becoming an engineer, I think, no, I didn't have yet the job opportunity, but immediately after my studies, I started working for that Fortune 500 company. It's a US company based with an R&D center in Luxembourg. And so I'm someone who is a bit cautious by nature, mm-hmm. and a bit risk adverse. And so I told myself, one day I will have my business, but now I will learn and try to practice what I've studied for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Nice. It's funny, I never had that thought. I don't think I knew really. I think like a lot of us, we just come out of university, and as you said, there's that fast moving train. You kind of just go to the next thing. I did a master's, and then you just go to the job, and it just kind of rolls on without really taking a step back to think about what I want to do. So that's really interesting that you had the thought of the entrepreneurial dream, I suppose. While you were doing the engineering, because that's quite a long time, I suppose, how did you see success? Were you seeing your career path as progressing through the ranks and becoming, a senior leader in that kind of organization? Or did you sense, oh, this is not quite for me, I see another future for me?
It's a good question, because when I had the interview and they asked me, where do you want to be in 10 years? I told actually two conflicting answers. I told myself that I would lead a team, mm-hmm. but that I would be in a different department than when I was what I was hired for. So I was a simulation engineer, so I was doing computer simulations. but I wanted to work in the department in charge of creating the software to do the simulation. And so that was my vision at the time, right? And I think partly I told them that I wanted to lead people because I wanted somehow to be seen as afterwards I learned the term management material, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to make a career, at one point, if you don't lead other people, it's not considered to be a career. What I didn't know is that in that company, they had actually a dual ladder system. I don't know if you've heard about that. Dual ladder.
No, not at all.
So a ladder system is, right, you start at a position and then you are maybe a low-level manager, mid-level manager, higher-level manager, then you become director and stuff like that. Well, in that company, they had a dual ladder. So you could go and follow a management path, but you could also follow a technical path. And so when I realized that, actually, I decided to follow the technical path where you would be more compensated. You would have a better title, a better salary, but you would not need to manage people. And I realized that in the end, I don't really like managing people.
That's so interesting. I've not heard of that dual ladder system, but it makes a lot of sense because it's very, I guess, mature of you to recognize in the interview that was the right answer, you should say, because it's true in most companies, you can only progress by becoming a leader of other people. So even if you love your job and you're really good at being a technician, you have to be good at leading people. And we're not all. Some of us are better at managing people and have a passion for that, and others are better technically. So that's really interesting that there's those two paths. And, obviously you said the right thing to get the job, and then you're able to evolve your vision. But you said that your vision evolved when you became a father. So can you tell me more about that moment, about, that the realization, I guess, of maybe how your vision of success changed now that you were going to maybe have children and family and different priorities?
Yeah, so it will date me, but I started working in 97. And so 10 years after that was 2007. And that's the year my first daughter was born. And I remember I didn't fully, I reached my goal at the time. So I managed to move in the department in charge of creating the software for the simulation. So I somehow reached my goal. And I think that maybe also linked to that, say, okay, so what's my next goal? Right. And I must say I'm very lucky. I'm living in Luxembourg, and the government offers almost the same advantages for fathers compared to mothers in terms of parental leave. And so right after my daughter was born, I applied for half-time parental leave. So for 12 months, I could work half-time, get paid, obviously, half my salary, but then have, I don't remember how much it was, but it was interesting for the money that the government was giving me. So I had more than half the salary. And that, in addition to spending time with my daughter, was also time for me to reflect on, okay, what would it look like if I didn't work there anymore, if I had my own business? And I think it coincided as well with me starting to do some voluntary work, basically doing what I'm doing today, but for free. So giving training, IT training classes, on-site consulting stuff, and to see a little bit what this world is about, without financial gains, but to practice a little bit, to see what it is, basically. And in the company where I was working, we were a small group of fathers, of men, who pushed a lot for being able to work from home from time to time, right? Teleworking. And it was like we were the first. There were a few fathers who wanted to do that. And we had so much pushback, right? So much pushback from management, from HR. And I think that's also part of my decision for, at one point, leaving the company and being independent. Yeah.
That's interesting because, of course, there's so much discussion now around working from home, and it feels like it's a more enlightened period. But then we see the pushback from lots of CEOs and companies mandating people back into the office. And I guess for you, yeah, that then gave you that additional push. It's also interesting, as you said, that you sort of achieved your goal within the organization and you start beginning to ask what's next. Sometimes it's unfortunately that we're made redundant and we kind of are forced to make a decision that way. But sometimes we're actually successful and then we go, hang on, is that it? Now I want to do something differently. So I guess, what about the moment when you decided to go all in with the business? That was more recently, wasn't it? So what helped you to make that transition? Because I think the dream for a lot of people is, part-time, amazing, I can then work on my business alongside. But the reality is often that we don't make so much progress and you get into that comfort zone of like, I'm kind of dabbling, not quite going full time, and you've still got the security of the existing job. So what helps you kind of take that leap?
So yeah, I did both parental leaves, part-time parental leaves for both my daughters. So the first one end of 2007 to 2008, and then the other one was end of 2009 to 2010. And I would say that at that point, as much as I knew I wanted to have my own business, I was quite fulfilled with my job, actually. Until I wanted something else, and I discovered lean management and lean product development. So it's a way of it's continuous improvement methodologies that's coming from manufacturing but applied for research and development. And I would say almost fell in love with that because I have this mindset of continuous improvement. And so I made the shift in 2010, 2011 with the idea of, if I can't succeed in bringing change, right, to that R&D environment in a department that is whose sole focus is to bring improvement and change, if I'm not able to do that, I'm going to leave the company, right? And it took me 2 years to realize that whatever I was doing, I would never succeed in changing the mindset of the top management and HR. And what pushed me was my wife, because my wife told me one day, look, you're talking about this your company, your business. In French, we say ma boîte. So you're talking always about this, but I don't see anything, right? When will you do it? And so I started to do some research. Okay, what does it mean in Luxembourg? How do we start a company and so on? And she actually found my first client.
Oh, wow. Well done to her. She's played an important role there in the process.
Yeah. It was pro bono, right? There was no company yet. There was nothing official at the time. But basically, I did a free gig. And that convinced me to, okay, let's go and do all the paperwork and so on. And funnily enough, I got the authorization to have a business on the birthday of my daughter. And I got the company was officially founded on the birthday of my wife.
Oh.
And so I remember that day I went to the notary, signed the paper for EasyTECH, and then 2 kilometers away, a restaurant with my wife for her birthday.
I love that. The birth of children, of relationships, of businesses, it all beautifully ties together. So what have been the challenges along the way then, would you say? Maybe a couple of the key difficulties and how you've overcome them, in terms of, obviously it's still a big leap to take, and there's the pressure of bringing in money for the family and so on. So what have been a couple of the challenges that you faced?
Mm-hmm. Well, a bunch of challenges. The first one was to actually decide on the business model. Will there be clients? Is there a market somewhere, right, in Luxembourg for what I want to do? I did the Venn diagram of what am I good at, what do I bring, which value could I bring to the marketplace, and where is the need, or who would be willing to pay, basically.
The purpose diagram. I love that one with the 4 circles.
Yeah. So that was the initial thing, and then because I like Apple, I took Steve Jobs' famous, I don't know if you know the 2x2 matrix of Steve Jobs when he returned to Apple. It was a mess. They had hundreds of products and computers. Nobody could understand what they were selling. And so he said, let's simplify. And so he drew a quadrant of 4 quadrants and said, we have computers for private individuals and for businesses. And then we need a laptop and a desktop, basically. So 4 computers. And I took the same idea and I said, okay, I need to find gigs in a B2B versus B2C sector. And I like training. I'm very good at providing training, and I also do consultancy. So I said, let's find a gig in one of these 4 quadrants and then decide which one pays the best, which one is the easiest to do. And I managed to only find 3. But that was enough for me to start and to realize that, there is a potential market. The second struggle was deciding when to quit. And so initially I had the idea I need to hit a certain monthly revenue or a certain amount of clients. And I quickly realized that it wouldn't work, or it would take a lot of time. And so I got a bit impatient, which is not in my nature. Usually I'm very patient, but there I got impatient. So impatient, you would say 2.5 years. It took me between starting the business officially and then quitting. That's 2.5 years. But still I became impatient. And so I changed the criteria for leaving my 9-to-5. And the criteria was I need to have 18 months worth of expenses covered, right? I needed a runway. That's how I decided in the end. And actually this runway, it provided for more than 24 months because I managed to reduce further the expenses afterwards. The third struggle, and it was a big one for me and I did not expect it at all, was the prospecting side of things. And there was a podcast that I listened to, and the host uses the analogy of the jungle, right? So you have lions who grew up in the jungle. They have no problem finding food. But then you have lions growing in zoo. They are fed. If you put them in nature, they will have a lot of difficulties finding something to eat. And I realized it was the same for me as an entrepreneur. I really needed to, and luckily I was in a mastermind. One of the member of the mastermind suggested a book on prospecting, and it helped me actually overcome that struggle.
Well, what a great metaphor. Where did that come from, the lion analogy? The jungle, do you remember?
Yes, it's Get Your Mind Right.
Okay.
Nii Shobo, the host.
Just because I'm sure I'll steal that, because it feels like a really good analogy, not just for prospecting, but for everything in corporate. Like you have your income coming in and you're getting paid your salary regardless of what you do. Now, of course, we're hardworking and we get great results, but if we didn't show up one day or didn't do our best work, we would be fine. Whereas, of course, when it's your own business, if I don't show up to a call, if I don't release my podcast episode, it doesn't necessarily happen the same way. So that's a really interesting analogy. But I think those three key points, they're so succinctly described, but that's exactly the work. I think everybody listening to this will go, oh my gosh, yes, I have experienced or am experiencing or will experience those three things, right? Because as you say, the business model, it's easy to fall into something that we've been doing. That's certainly what I did. I went straight into digital marketing consulting, which I eventually pivoted away from because it wasn't the reason why I'd taken the huge leap out of corporate. I was doing the same kind of work. But when you first come out, you don't know, and you kind of, some opportunity comes along, you kind of just go with the flow, in my case at least, and then it took more time to work out what I wanted to do. And as much as I'm a fan of strategy and all these Venn diagrams and things, there's only so much you can do from behind your desk, right? You have to actually, we talked about sending out surveys or talking to people or trying to sell something to actually know if it's going to work. And that prospecting thing, I mean, people, actually showing up is a huge thing. Some people don't want to show up on video and they feel like it's a bit to promote myself and so on. And that's not something we have to do again so much. Although I'd argue that actually building your image and personal brand within a company is also important, especially if you want to be open to career opportunities and so on. And I'm jumping around a bit, but your second point as well is really interesting because it would feel so much safer, wouldn't it, if I had a pipeline of 20 clients waiting for me and an income of 10K or whatever it is. But certainly most people have maybe a day during the week and even less. And even if they've got 2 days, if you've got all the business development, admin, accounting, etc., there's not so much work to get that. So I love that reframe of actually rather having a runway of cutting down on expenses and knowing that you can cover that to take a bit of the pressure off. But that's a really difficult decision. Just briefly on your business model, I guess now, where have you landed? Like what kind of clients are you working with and what is your strategy for monetization and all those lovely things that we need to do in business?
So that's also very funny for me. It's that you remember the fourth quadrant that I did not hit when well, that's my business model right now.
Okay, I love that. You see, that makes it even harder to land on the right strategy, but you got there in the end. So tell us more.
Exactly. I tried 3. I took one of the 3, and then I realized it was not a good one. And actually, EasyTECH at one point, financially speaking, was very, very bad. It was summer of 2018. Very, very bad. And luckily, I was able to go into a program for flailing businesses in Luxembourg. So it's like an entrepreneurship coaching program. And thanks to that program, I realized, no, I absolutely need to go to that fourth quadrant.
Okay, wow.
Absolutely. And so with the help of some mentors and also myself, learning knowing now better how to prospect, I managed to find some key clients that today, right, I think I have maybe 4 clients and they represent 70% of my revenue. And that was the game-changing aspect for me.
Amazing. Right? That's sort of the 80-20 Pareto principle, isn't it? We think we need a lot of clients, but actually if you've got the right clients, strategy, pricing and so on, you can have just a handful and that will hit your targets. Amazing. That's great that support is available, as you said, for failing companies. Because I think a lot of people at that moment go, and apply to a job and give up rather than keep going at that very moment when you make the difference. What about the prospecting and so on? How are you doing on that in terms of building your brand? And obviously you're here talking to me on the podcast. Is that something you often do? How are you putting yourself out there in terms of marketing and sales?
So now, the third phase of my business basically is to go online. So the Macpreneur brand is the thing that will become the 80%, right? For the moment, it's 0%.
Okay.
But my goal is 80% of my business is coming internationally. It's online, an online business.
So you've been working offline in Luxembourg up until now. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I have 100%. Even though I do remote training for some of my clients, they are still based in Luxembourg. Even though sometimes so my clients, the person that I invoice the company I invoice is in Luxembourg, but the people that I train may be somewhere in Europe.
Okay.
But so it's a new challenge for me, totally new challenge, because I think I know how to do prospecting and to convert leads for an offline business. And it's totally new. Now I need to build an online brand, find a way to be discovered. Right? That's why I've relaunched the podcast, the Macpreneur podcast, which was started in 2018 and ended end of 2019. But at the time, I realized it was not focused enough. I think it was more me a little bit showing off my Apple, knowledge. And now with season 2 of the podcast, it's really now focusing more on helping solopreneurs really streamline their business. It's really, okay, how can I take and use all the techniques that I've learned in my previous job, right? Trying to optimize processes for a very large company. I take all this knowledge and I combine that with all the Mac knowledge that I have. And how can I help solopreneurs who don't have a lot of time, basically, and to teach themselves to learn how to master their Apple computers, and how can I distill that in short episodes. So it's really 20 minutes roughly episodes.
Amazing. And so this is, you're working with individuals, B2C now, internationally, and what's the offering then? Do you have sort of group programs or training courses, or how are you going to be delivering your expertise?
So it's at the beginning, it will be individual coaching and mentoring. Yeah, that will be the beginning. And I will see later on if there is some demand for group coaching, group accountability. For the moment, it's a bit too early for me to know.
No, it's always great to start. And again, I love your curiosity and your experimenting, and starting with the individual coaching, mentoring is such a good way to validate and to deliver great results for your clients, isn't it? And I guess not final question, but final area that I'm interested in is this idea of work-life integration. And coming back to the beginning, you talked about the importance of the birth of your 2 children, and your wife played a pivotal moment as well. So I imagine spending quality time with her hopefully is important as well. What does your day-to-day look like? Obviously, you're at a bit of a transition in your work now. So you've got your offline business. You're also trying to build the online. How many days a week are you working? Do you have the control and freedom that you are hoping for? Talk us through sort of the practicalities of running your business.
So I consider myself lucky to have the control of my calendar, which means that I also had to learn to put some boundaries in place. So having so block time in my calendar. And for instance, I don't work Fridays. Let's say I don't do client work on Fridays. And I also now block every Monday morning. It's still for the business, but it gives me the breathing space to now work on the Macpreneur stuff. So my eldest daughter is actually studying at home. How do we say homeschooling? Yeah. It didn't work so well for her in the school, in the secondary school she was, and so now she's doing an online Oxford degree, GCSE. She's doing the GCSE from home, which is for me, it's good because I'm there almost every day, so I can take care of lunch if it's needed. And apart from that, on the personal side, I have a morning routine. So I wake up usually 5:30, 6, and I dedicate an hour for myself, doing some exercises. So either fitness or stretching stuff. I have every day 15 minutes for learning about tech, learning about now AI. Right? I'm in a process of comparing ChatGPT and Google Bard, trying to understand.
Let me know your insights. Looking forward to that one.
Which one is better for what? And being there, being at home most of the time. So during COVID, obviously every training session I was giving was remote. Now since 2022, I'm starting to have requests for obviously in-person training sessions, but it's very rare. Yeah. Now, the big struggle for me is to not work after dinner.
And why is that? Because you've got all this new business that you're building and you're excited about it and you want it to work, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Up until last year, I was accepting actually client work after dinner. And then last year I said I had to put a boundary in place. I said, no client work after 8 p.m. And but it's tough. And that's the tough part of being a solopreneur.
Well, it's the other side of freedom, right? Because really you can work, but you love it, you care about it, it's important, you're desperate for money. Sometimes you need it to work in some cases, and you don't want to turn clients away. So I think those are the sort of push and pull we need to go through. I mean, when I had my daughter, actually, she's only 4 and a bit, but when I had her as a newborn, I started working after about 6 weeks. I'd prepared all my content and I just had a couple of one-to-one, but I was working late in the evenings and early in the mornings, and then I did some webinars at 5 in the morning with Asia just because I was up anyway, right? And a newborn's relatively easy just to pass to my partner, but then of course when they're toddlers, they're running around talking, and then it's not so easy. And I'm so tired now in the evenings. I so admire people who can work in the evening, but not that I necessarily want to. Whenever I try, I just make lots of mistakes. So I'm learning to have those boundaries. Exactly that. My daughter's starting school in September, so suddenly that becomes a whole different ball game, right? It's 5 days a week, but it's shorter days and so on. And I imagine, so how old are so 16 is she, or then how old are your children?
Yeah, 16 and 14.
16 and 14, yeah. So that'd be interesting when you become an empty nester, I guess, in a few years' time. That'll be a different scenario as well for you.
Yeah, it's always adapting to their age. And what was nice, and I remember it was before COVID, is being able to actually, I took a week off it was beginning of June, and there was my youngest. They had a class. They had a class trip. We went to Germany, and that was really to be able to do that, right? Obviously, I didn't take any vacation. It was not vacation. It was not. I don't have a bank of holiday days, but just being able to do that is something I could not have done when I was in my 9 to 5.
No, it's incredible.
And so you're talking about success, right? How do we define success, right? And so for me, the way I define success is be able to do what I love with whom I want, when I want, where I want, and not worry about money. And that's my definition of success. And when I looked at it when I was working for my employer, I was managing to have a 25% score.
Okay. I love that. I love that you've got a percentage on it, but you're right. That can be applied to a job as well, right? But maybe, and sometimes if you're lucky, you can tick a few more, but 25%, maybe not quite where you want it to.
So basically, it was between 25 and 50 because the not worrying about money was there.
Yeah.
Right? When you're an employee. And then there was a little bit of doing what I love. I was not doing 100% of what I love, but I always managed to sneak into things so that I could do what I loved. And when I became an entrepreneur, I hit the 75 immediately.
Wow, that's great.
Because I was able to do what I love, with whom I want, when I want, where I want. Right? But the money part is the thing that is still the one factor that prevents me today to say, okay, I'm 100% successful.
Yeah. Oh no, and I think that's so important because I mean, in slight naivety, when I left my corporate, I was like, "Oh, money doesn't matter," and I went very far in sort of the hippie adventure phase, right? But then you come to realize, hang on a second, yes, it does matter, both because you have to pay your bills, but because you want to live a lifestyle to whatever level you want, and of course, it allows you to do things as well as being a representation of you making an impact and helping people, right? So you're not doing it pro bono anymore. I talk about freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment, and I've probably since then added the fun and also financial security. And I think you're right that as much as, I earned more in my first 2 years as an independent consultant than I did in my job, but it wasn't security, it was referrals. And then I changed and became more of a coach. And then suddenly, whoop, the salary went down to zero again, right? So I think that's very interesting in terms of seeing a progressive ladder. Unfortunately, the financial security comes much later. The freedom is immediate. The fulfillment comes right away, the flexibility. But that security, unfortunately, we just, I was going to say we have to wait for longer, but certainly we have to work for longer to really get that consistency. But the biggest insight I hear from you, and thanks so much, that quote is definitely going on the graphic on Instagram. I can see it now. So thanks for giving me the little bite-sized comment there, to soundbite. That's what I was looking for. But I hear that the sort of the being in it for the long haul for me, because some people, they just want, and as you said, you're not an impatient person, but a lot of us are. We take this big decision, and I always thought, ta-da, I've quit my job, now I'm going to live the dream. And as we've just said, there are elements of the dream, but it takes time. And that, I love that quadrant from being inspired by Steve Jobs and Apple and so on. But you try something, maybe it works a little bit, not quite enough, or your preferences change, your family situation changes, that evolves. COVID happened, offline, online, all these things. And it's knowing that you have what you need to evolve. And yes, now you're requiring to learn a new set of skills to some extent and pivoting your strategy to bring Macpreneur to the world. But I hear that you're going to make that happen. And that's sort of the attitude, it's, oh, well, it's just, this has changed. And how do I do that now? It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how. So if people want to learn more about you, Damien, how can we find you?
Well, they can visit the website, macpreneur.com. They will be able to see the latest episodes, full transcript. Now it's on YouTube as well. So I have embedded the YouTube video in the post, or they can connect with me on social media. I'm at Macpreneur FM, like the FM radio, on Instagram and Twitter. And it's also on YouTube, right? If they search for Macpreneur FM on YouTube, they will find me as well.
Nice. I love the brand. Again, like Youpreneur, Macpreneur, I love these names. I've been constantly looking for a name like that for me, but I just can't quite land on it. But hey ho, I can still manage even without the catchy title. But congratulations on that, and great to hear that you're bringing back the podcast. It's such an amazing platform, and I love how you positioned that maybe before you were doing it for your own sake, and now you're obviously doing it in service to the people you're supporting. So look, Damien, thank you so much. I've loved that. I've loved getting to know you a little bit now. You've been kind of on the periphery. I've seen you in the Facebook group and around, so really so lovely to meet you. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. Really thoughtful and intelligent comments. So thanks so much for sharing your story, and best of luck with the next stage of your business.
Thank you, my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Hey, before you hang up, as it were, I have some news for you. I'm running a workshop on niching, all things niching. So how to niche, how to refine your niche, narrow it down, how to test, validate, and how to pivot your niche, how to evolve it over time. So you can join us on Thursday, the 10th of August. I hope you're around this summer. I know we're hopefully enjoying some nice weather here in the Northern Hemisphere. In the South, maybe you're working business as usual. But Thursday, the 10th of August, you can go to onestepoutside.com/niche, onestepoutside.com/niche.